What's going on, team? Proof here, and today I'm coming at you with a catch-up report because in the last couple days, Butcher has given us 5 non-trigger cards to talk about. So as the recording of this video, we know what Rise of Nova does because it was part of the early morning stream today. However, there's a lot to unpack with Rise of Nova. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to talk about the 4 other cards that we got between yesterday and today, and then do a separate video kind of breaking down Rise and Nova and all the implications that he has going on. So this video is going to be strictly with these 4 cards, and I'm going to talk about them the best I can without talking about too much about Rise and Nova and kind of detour that way. So I'll do that to the best of my ability. But hopefully this doesn't take too long because I kind of want to keep this kind of succinct, but we'll see what we do, right? But the first card that I have is Outside Rabbit, and it's a grade 1 rare 7k, and it says when placed by your card's ability, call Soul Blast 1, and until end of turn, this unit can attack the Vanguard from the back row, and it gets plus 5,000 power. So this card is an improved version of Full Speed Spectre that we got in V era, and as you can see from the skill, it's similar but different. Full Speed Spectre costs a counter blast, and ironically, at the time that we got Full Speed Spectre, I was complaining that it costs a counter blast instead of a soul blast because Spikes always had this soul to use, but no real great outlets during V era outside of a few exceptions. And I was like, why didn't this cost the soul? Because it made more sense since it could attack from the back row and Spikes were fine with soul, unlike counterblast. But now we kind of got that in Outside Rabbit. So how good is it? It's decent-ish, and decent enough to it might be fun to experiment with, but I don't know if it's gonna make the most competitive version of Spikes in standard. I don't think it really has a place in premium either. It would be kind of fun with maybe Agrius, for example, but I don't think that's going to remain to be the case. But the reason why it's not that fantastic is because the ways to call it is like Ronaldo, Spike Bouncer, Gyro Slinger, those cards. But unless you combine it with Bull Spike, then it being a 12k attacker isn't fantastic. It's only a 1 card guard. You have to give up the booster to do it unless you tuck it behind Vanguard, where it doesn't matter as much. So I guess it could be like center arrestor in that regard. I think that's the way it works. But I think the grade 1 space is so jam-packed with utility cards that I think you can do better than include a card like Outside Rabbit to it. And like I mentioned, you're able to slide your force markers to it via Bull Spike, but then at the same time, you have to be able to call it out via a card effect to make it happen. And sometimes you may not be able to put those 2 pieces together because the ability to search out a grade 1 or 2, you hear the dogs barking, the ability to call out a grade 1 or 2 is more RNG reliant because Ronaldo checks the top X, Spike Bouncer checks the top X, so does Gyro Slinger. So you're not guaranteed to find Outside Rabbit, and Outside Rabbit's already kind of a tech card if you choose to use it. It's not a central card at all because outside of the ability, it's a 7k vanilla, which isn't fantastic. So I don't think it's going to see much use in play, but it is nice to see them go outside the box a little bit with some of the cards. And the next card we got is Spike and Cyclone, the other card that we received in yesterday's card of the day. It's a grade 3 double rare, and it gets a force gift, which is great. And it says continuous on Vanguard during your turn. This unit gets plus 5,000 power for each force marker on your circles. And then auto on Vanguard. When it attacks, it gets counterblast 1, and then stay in one of your rear guards. So for the first skill, it is nice to be able to know that it just gets free power, so you don't need to have the force marker on your Vanguard to make it a pretty decent attack. And if you ride it first, it becomes a 18k unboosted, which is solid. And then you can put any booster behind it to make it still hit your opponent's Vanguard, or at least force guard fairly consistently. And for the second skill, it is a rarity to see like a guaranteed restand in Spikes because up to now, it's been kind of having to jump through some sort of hoop to get some type of restand on your rear guard. General Seyfried had to hit and Soul Blast to make it happen. and it was fairly easy or fairly common to see General Seyfried's attack be guarded. And the combo with Grand Mobile needed to have a second Grand Mobile in Soul, so you needed to either have a way to do it by like Ronaldo Gyroslinger, or you had to use General Seyfried to put one in the Soul to then activate Grand Mobile, which was a 2 CB combo for 1 restand, which isn't fantastic. And you had the Persona Blast, which is why you needed the second copy. So up before Spike and Cyclone, you need to have some type of hoop to jump through to make your restand happen. But with him, you just have to attack with it, and it's not even like attack on Vanguard. So you can attack into a rear guard with it, and if your opponent has some type of threatening rear guard, you can just threaten to get it out the way and still get the restand, which is really awesome. And the fact that it's a double rare makes it a great budget option for people that want to get into Spikes and have a taste of what it can do, and kind of build your deck around him being your boss as a budget card if you can't get Ryzen Nova in the future. That's really impressive, and that's really cool, and I see a great future for this card, especially when you combine it with Ryzen in the future. And then next up, we have one of the cards we got in today's stream, which was Ambush Dexter. He says auto on Vanguard when placed, discard a card to draw a card, and then auto on rear guard when placed, counterblast 1 and put a grade 2 or greater rear guard into your Soul. Search your deck for up to 2 cards with the same grade as the card put into your Soul with this cost, and then call them to rear guard circle, and then shuffle your deck. So this card is really impressive because it kind of takes General Seyfried's Tuck in the Soul to call, but it evolves it into a +1, which is something that we haven't seen before, really. Well, have we? We may. Off the top of my head, we haven't seen something that put something in the Soul and called out 2 in its place for Spikes. It's always been 1-for-1 trades, or in the case of Ronaldo, you put 1 card in and then you call 2 out. But I think that's the closest comparison that we might have. But being able to absorb 1 card on your field and turn it into 2 cards makes it a really nice way to be aggressive early game. And not to talk too much about Ryzen, it does help you increase the ability to get Ryzen active on your first grade 3 turn, but we'll get into that later. But the fact that you can absorb 2 grade 3 or 2 grade 2s and turn them into 2 additional grade 2s, like if you're feeling desperate for power, you can absorb a random grade 2 and turn them into 2 brackies on your board, which both activate their ability to be able to get plus 10,000 power to end the turn, which is really cool and a really welcome addition to see something like this come into Spikes. And I can see this, it does cost a counterblast like most +1 abilities for Spikes in Standard, but to see it on a grade 1 is very different and unique, and I think it definitely earned his double rare status, which I forgot to mention that he is a grade 1 double rare 8K, which is really cool. And so I'm really looking forward to playing this card and play testing with it, just to see what everything it can do in the context of your grade 2s and with your grade 3s. And then the last card I wanted to talk about for the cards that we received in the stream that wasn't Ryzen Nova is Adore. It's hard for me to say this. It's Adorb's Palm Rorna. And before we go further, her name, if you see her phonetic name, it does spell Rona, like coronavirus. And I definitely expect to see memes surrounding her name being spelled this way. And I imagine it'll be like that if it comes to English with that particular spelling. I'm gonna do my best to call it Rorna or Runa. So that's kind of get that on the front end. I don't want to make jokes or memes about the coronavirus because of how serious it has been, but that is her name. Do with it as you will, but I'm gonna do my best not to call her Rona, but I'm gonna keep her Rorna or Runa depending on how the English name gets it, the English spelling of her name when it's translated. But that being said, her skill says when placed on Vanguard or rear guard, counterblast 1, search your deck for up to 1 grade 3 card, call it to rear guard circle and shuffle your deck. And then continuous on rear guard, if you have a grade 3 in the same column as her, she gets boost. So this is the first grade, or I'm sorry, this is the first Spikes card grade 2 that could boost from the back row ever. So and that's really impressive. I'm liking the direction of a lot of these cards are going. But for her first skill, it is a raw +1 to search out a grade 3, which, like, just to be able to counterblast and search your deck for any grade 3 is really pushed, in my opinion, because like I mentioned with Ronaldo, Bouncer, Gyro Slinger, they've all been searched top X for a card. Granted, this is a specific search for a grade 3, but outside of, or in standard, there really hasn't been like very specific tutoring to this degree. So I think that's really impressive. In the early game, her best call at the current moment is by far Juggernaut Maximum. So if you want to lean more into an early aggressive build, you can play Rorna and on plays get her skill, call out a Jugs Maximum, and then maybe call out a Bracky to the opposite side. So now you have 23k unboosted, a Rorna, and then you have Bracky being 20k unboosted on the other side, which is probably very effective to either push your opponent to decent damage or force multiple cards out of your opponent's hand. And that's really impressive. And she does have implication, sorry, I forgot to scroll to show you the boost part of her skill, but she does have implications with Rising Nova, and for that she's going to be a staple card regardless of what direction you want to go with your deck. Unless you play a deck that's either not Rising based or without Juggernaut Maximum, then you don't really have a place for Rorna. But I imagine most decks going forward are gonna play either Rising or some type of Rising Nova mix, at which point you want to keep Rorna involved to be able to enable that to the best of your ability. And being able to become a booster if you have a grade 3 in the same column as her is really impressive, because if you combine it with Spike and Cyclone, if you have a grade 3 rear guard in your front row for Spike and Cyclone's ability, you can then attack unboosted for 23k and then restand it with Cyclone, and then that column becomes 33k, which means it's very likely going to hit Force 1 if assuming that has Force 1 enabled to it. But even if it has Force 2, it can attack for 13k unboosted and force a card out of your opponent's hand, and then restand and then be able to attack for 23k minimum. And that's really cool. Oh, and something I forgot to talk about with Dexter is we know what Cradle Markers do with Gridora and Mega Colony, and Dexter, provided he's not one of the cards that has a Cradle Marker on it, you can reset your rear guard and negate the Cradle Marker from your Mega Colony opponent with the grade 3 that you absorb. And then whenever you call over, or let me rephrase that, depending on if it's a grade 2 or grade 3 you can absorb it into your soul and then negate the search from your opponent or your Mega Colony opponent, and then you can call over the other one if you have multiples on the board with the Cradle Markers, and it'll help reduce your opponent being able to get advantage from you calling over your rear guards in the future. So something I want to talk about real quick with Dexter, but I really enjoy the direction of these cards. Spike and Cyclone is amazing. Dexter is really good, and Rorna is really good as well. Outside Rabbit, not that great in my opinion, but it might be a fun card to look into if you want to keep your build, like if you want to keep your costs down and you want to abuse it with Bull Spike and Ronaldo and the like. But that'll do it for the non-Rising cards we received in the last couple of days. The next video tomorrow is going to be me breaking down Rising Nova and everything that goes along with him. So definitely check that out. I'm excited for the direction Spikes are going right now, and I'll catch you next time. Peace. Be easy.